Chapter 28. We hustled back onto a busy street and slowed to a quick walk, trying to blend in with the moving masses. Tiffany came to an abrupt halt and pulled me into the entryway of a fruit and vegetable shop. "What's the matter?" I asked, my heart still trying to find the right rhythm.
"There's a cop standing in the subway entrance, across the street. Do you see him?"
I casually snuck my head around the rack of mangoes and ducked behind some hanging sweet potatoes. Sure enough, there was a cop standing in the entrance, his car parked illegally half a block down. Someone should really report him for abuse of power. Damn him parking in a bus zone, I said, clenching my fist and shaking it dramatically behind a bunch of hanging beets. She didn't find me funny for some reason, indicating that she must have some issues. I know I'm freaking hysterical.
"Be serious. I guarantee you he's looking for us. How are we supposed to get past him?"
My mind started going through numerous action movies, which I'm pretty sure all were based on real life, right? Unfortunately, all my ideas were based around the hot chick causing a diversion with copious amounts of cleavage and stiletto heels. Tiffany certainly had all the right parts to play the role, but her tattoos and purple hair were something of a giveaway. I, on the other hand, blended in fairly well on my own. No real distinguishing features other than I was a bit tall, especially for Chinatown, but I would have to risk it. "I think I'll go talk to him," I announced. "You go down the block and come from the other direction. If he pulls his gun, I'll defend you. Don't shoot him. Got it?"
"I'll do my best," she said with a grin. "This is a dumb plan, but we can't stay here forever. Maybe we should just hide out for a few days."
I shook my head firmly, so she shrugged and added,
"Okay, we'll try it your way. Just be on the lookout for his partner. Hunters work in pairs."
Interesting tidbit. I wonder if Zuanella knew that. Before she could think of a good reason to stop me, I quickly walked out and across the street. The policeman had his back to the street and was more concerned with the throng of people moving in and out of the several shops or restaurants on his side. I moved quickly and nonchalantly, as if I really had some place to go. Pulling Nella's flip phone out of my pocket, I found the contact list and selected the first unnamed number. It started ringing as I dropped it in an open wastebasket. As I got close, I could see that he was fairly beefy and probably was a card-carrying member of the local Dunkin' Donuts. While his gut hung heavily over his belt, his neck was still bigger than my thigh, so I decided not to get too close. On my approach to the subway entrance, he locked his gaze on me and held it for a second longer than one does when just scanning a crowd. He was trying to decide if I fit a description. Too late to turn back now, time to escalate. "How you doing, sir?" I asked in an upbeat, friendly voice. "I was hoping you could help me here." He squared his stance in my direction, and I realized he probably had 200 pounds on me. My muscles were taut, waiting for him to pull his gun or swing his baton or maybe even launch a handful of ninja stars. Hey, we're in Chinatown. It could happen. Instead, he grinned and leaned heavily back on the streetlight. "Yeah, what can I do for you? You lost?"
"Huh, maybe. Listen, I was supposed to meet some buddies at the subway stop in Chinatown, but they are already a half hour late. Is there another subway entrance around? I was about to head down to look for a map."
Why not just give them a call? They're probably waiting for you over on 2nd.
"Yeah, I dropped my damn phone in the toilet this morning, so it's sitting in a bag of rice drying out."
He laughed. "You know it doesn't work, right? Well, good luck with that. Come on over to the car. I'll show you my map." He walked beside me over to his car, parked 20 feet away, exactly at the bus stop sign that said in bright letters, "No parking." Opening the door of his cruiser, I got the distinct impression that this was a trap. Considering how diligently he was scanning the crowd just a few seconds ago, he quite easily diverted his full attention on me. I chanced to glance back down the street toward the subway entrance and saw Tiffany coming this way. "You see here," the officer said, laying out the map on the roof of the cruiser, "you got a few options for Chinatown. This location is right here on the map, and these are the train times for today. The other two possible locations are not far. Hold this side of the map for me and I'll point them out." The second I placed my hand on the roof of the car, the cop swung in one quick motion and a handcuff flipped around my wrist. My sight immediately went to blue. His motion slowed to a crawl. The panic I was anticipating never materialized. A sense of calm radiating through me. The sound of an echo resonating click came from the handcuff being closed around my wrist. With the slightest of efforts, I stopped the cuffs from closing. Time returned to normal now that I had a handle on the situation, but everything remained blue, ready to respond again. The cop grunted and I quickly pulled my hand out of the closing cuff. In one motion, I flipped the other side of the cuff around his left wrist. The panic on his face revealed how much he underestimated me. Using the power, I grabbed the other side of the cuffs and slapped them around the pole of the bus stop. Rage replaced the panic on his face, and he yelled, "You have no fucking idea who you're dealing with! Prepare to suffer, you moron!" The people were stepping back, shocked by the scene the cop was creating. The clatter of the handcuff on the pole could be heard for blocks, probably. The cop reached for the ball of keys hanging from his belt. I focused my power on the loop and stretched it out till it broke, sending the keys flying in all directions. "Damn you!" He reached for his walkie next, so I sent it flying into the street. Finally, he reached for his gun. "Don't do that," I warned, stretching a hand out towards him, my world still blue with power at the ready. "Don't." And he fired. Easily, I stopped the bullet. Then, remembering Nella's lesson about pulling a gun out of someone's hand directly at you, I pushed the gun out of his hand and it flipped into the open door of the cruiser. I was faintly aware of a second, louder gunshot from behind me and saw a cluster of steel balls slowly trailing toward the cop. I loosed my grip on the first bullet and it fell straight to the ground, my attention now on stopping the cluster of bullets heading toward the cop. Each ball of shot was much harder to stop as they moved away from me at top speed, so I decided to just curve the cluster around the cop. The glass on the cop's door shattered and several sparks flew as the steel ricocheted off the body of the car. Who knows where they might have landed? I looked at the cop, who probably needed an underwear change, and said, "You owe me, pal." My attention was fully on Tiffany, who had unexpectedly come to my assistance with her own brand of justice. As I turned to stop her from firing again at the now defenseless cop, the hair on the back of my neck stood frigidly up. A fast-moving trail silently flew by her, tearing into my arm and knocking me to the ground. Tiffany spun around to see another man approaching fast with a silenced pistol. Another shot ricocheted off the cement next to me, making several people scream and scatter. My vision was no longer blue, and a searing pain began erupting from my bicep. Blood was pouring out of the two holes made when the bullet passed through. A resounding boom snapped my attention back to Tiffany, just in time to see the man fly through the air and land heavily in the middle of the street, a wisp of smoke lingering from the barrel of the sawed-off shotgun in her hands. Tiffany pulled me to my feet. "Are you okay?" There was panic in her voice. "We need to move. Please be okay." I just nodded and clutched my left arm to slow the bleeding. "Let's go. The subway is a bad idea. They'll be waiting for us at every stop." My voice shook. I felt lightheaded. Tiffany supported me, seeing that I was unstable. "Okay, let's get out of here." She turned and added under her breath, "Oh, what fresh hell is this?" The crowd of pedestrians had mostly cleared the area, which highlighted two more individuals running right for us. Both were young males in leather jackets. Neither had a gun out, but Tiffany hadn't yet concealed hers, so they knew what they were getting into. They spread out and took cover. Tiffany shouted first. "There's a lot of blood already on the street. You really want to restart today?" One of the guys, possibly Mexican, or he could just have an amazing tan, stood and fired 3 shots in rapid succession. Instinctively, I wiped the bullets out of the air and they smashed into the building behind us. Tiffany smiled up at me and raised her shotgun. Casually, she grabbed several shells out of her pocket and slowly reloaded, all the while smiling at the tan gentleman. The other guy, not so tan, peeked out from behind a newsstand box and fired 2 more shots. Easily, I wiped them to the side. My spinning head told me not to try to stop bullets at this point. Tiffany loved this, feeling invulnerable, fearless. She pointed the shotgun at the newsstand and fired several shots. The metal frayed and the box came off the bolts, anchoring it to the cement. The guy fired again wildly, and I wiped them even though they were far off target. "I suggest you run," she said in a level voice. He ran. Tiffany moved around the car, gun searching for the second hunter. He was gone. She looked back at me, and a look of horror panned her face. The barrel of a gun touched the back of my head. Gingerly, I raised my arms in the air, well, as much as I could. "Lose the shotgun, Tiff," he said with a sneer.
Unless you think you can accurately fire around your boyfriend's face.
Technically not dating, but I think I'll correct him later. Tiffany looked at me for direction, and I slowly shook my head, indicating that I did not want her shooting the shotgun at my head. Not that I was worried about her bullets. I just wasn't sure I could stop his bullet before it even left the gun. Tiffany tossed the gun aside.
The others?
She sighed and tossed her pistol aside. Now what? Tiffany asked with a tone of frustration in her voice.
Well, the hunter replied coolly, first we need to take care of this problem. Unfortunately, the boss wants him alive, but of course, you already knew that.
I think I forgot to ask some important questions. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the cop, still cuffed to the pole, moving to a standing position. A snap came from his direction, and I barely managed to curve the 2 projectiles around either side of my body. The hunter immediately dropped to the ground and twitched violently, the 2 leads of the taser gun embedded in each arm. The cop looked shocked and horrified, having just ruined a perfectly good capture. Thanks, buddy. I guess that makes us even, I said to the cop. A fresh crowd of people were coming out of the subway, some of them in panic. This isn't exactly a party up here, folks. Tiffany scrambled over to me. No time, Finn. We need to put some distance between us and this spot. Subway it is. Halfway down the steps of the subway, I could hear people shouting something about, he's got a gun. Tiffany either didn't care or didn't notice because she pulled me forward. It took me several seconds to adjust to the lighting. The subway platform was dimly lit from several fluorescent lights. There were a few people still running out of the area, but it was mostly clear. At the far end, we could hear voices. This is bad, Tiff. We need to get out, I said with a bit of panic. Agreed, she said, and we turned to go back up the stairs. After just 2 steps, the white guy in leather that ran away when given the chance was coming down the stairs, a very familiar sawed-off shotgun in his hand. The irony struck me immediately that if I had just let Tiffany restart the coward, we wouldn't be in this predicament. He didn't give us any time to think about it and immediately fired, the boom of the shotgun reverberating off the walls of the subway echo chamber. Even in my slightly weakened state, I shifted easily to the power to stop the bullets. To my surprise, he was firing at Tiffany, not me. I guess she was not in her good graces any longer. Tiffany didn't wait for him to get off another shot, and silently flipped a polished silver knife at the hunter. It silently lodged deep in his throat, followed by a stream of blood and a gurgling sound. The gun clattered to the ground as the man dropped to his knees and fell forward. Sorry, she said, looking at me. Couldn't be helped. For once, I agreed. The voices were approaching fast, and we ducked behind the nearest cement pillar. I couldn't make out clearly what they were saying because they were all yelling through the echo effect of the room. Tiffany held on to my good arm, shaking slightly from fear. What do we do? She whispered in my ear. The room had gone silent except for the approaching footsteps. A booming voice filled the room. Finn Rourke, your time has drawn to a close and my patience has expired. Surely you do not fear your probatus. I looked down at my watch and reflected back on the schedule for the trains. 2 minutes, Tiffany. The next train is 2 minutes. I'll distract them. You hop on the train and get out of here. Don't worry about me. I'll meet you back at the flat. Absolutely not, she protested. We stick together. I smiled at her stubbornness, even though it would probably get her killed. No time to argue, I said. I'm going to put out the lights to confuse him, if I can, and I'll jump on the train at the last minute. Blue light replaced the white fluorescent lights as I focused the power. Pop, pop, pop. Each one broke and went dark. The room took on an eerie darkness with deep shadows from the daylight filtering in from the stairway. After a few shouts of confusion across the room, a bright light started down the long black tunnel. The next train approached. As it pulled into the station, the shadows from the pillars shifted and moved, the new light from the train now shining through the compartment windows and lighting the platform. A door was directly in front of us. As soon as the door opens, we both dash through, I said in a whisper. Tiffany nodded. I had no intention of staying on the train. Someone had to cause a distraction so she could escape. After several seconds, the doors remained closed, and the bell, indicating the train's imminent departure, sounded. Come on, damn it, open! I jumped to my feet, and Tiffany followed. Racing to the nearest door and trying to pull it open, my biceps screamed and fresh blood flowed again. But I couldn't worry about a simple flesh wound at this point. We had one shot to get out of here, and it depended on us getting this door open. We ran down to the next one and saw the oncoming crowd of hunters coming toward us at a run. To my surprise, the doors popped open, and I almost ran directly into the perfect suit and expensive shoes standing in the doorway. Tiffany was backing away in horror. It took me several seconds to realize that Anand was stepping off the train, a devilish grin on his pale face.
Now, Mr. Rourke, if I didn't know any better, I'd say you were thinking you could avoid your destiny. Inceptus interim, Mr. Rourke. Time to restart.
His voice smooth as always, totally calm. He was casually adjusting his cufflinks as if this was just another day at the office.
And Tiffany, my dear, you weren't crossing me, were you? After all I've done for you, I would hate for you and I to part on less than amicable terms. As you know, that would only hurt you, not me.
Of course not, she replied with no emotion. You know me better than that, Anand. As promised, I delivered him here, alive, ready to make a deal. I told you he was worth trying to turn. His potential is higher than any other I've brought you this far. Killing him would have been a waste, and far too easy to be interesting anyway.
Damn women. This had better be part of her plan to get us out of here. I watched her turn away and head back to the stairs up to the street. Her posture and gait were full of confidence, but her tear-filled eyes betrayed her. I kept waiting for her to turn around and offer some sign of hope that this was not actually happening. My line of sight was interrupted by a hook-nosed Chacho with a bad case of halitosis. His crooked brown teeth were on full display as he smiled and brought his oversized .45 caliber hand cannon to my head. Anand spoke up finally in a smooth, barely audible voice behind me.
Ah, my dear, I'm afraid it just isn't that easy.
Chacho nodded and turned to point the gun at the back of Tiffany, who was still walking to the stairs. The muscles on his forearm flexed in slow motion as I thrust my hands out in front of me, and the world slammed into a deep shade of blue. The muted blast resonated in the hall, and the bullet raced toward the back of Tiffany's head. Even with time slowed, the bullet moved extremely fast, a huge distortion wake carved through the air behind it. I focused my will and pushed it out to the speeding bullet, directly through the Mexican thug like he wasn't even there. Collapsing my will in a sphere around the bullet, I knew I was about to find out how far my power extended. 20 feet? Maybe 30? Too far to stop a bullet, wrong direction to curve it. The voice in my head was totally calm. Don't think, Finn. Just connect to a source and have faith in the power. Faith of a child. The music from the train was growing louder and louder. The Moonlight Sonata pounded through my chest as I felt the power grow with each heartbeat. The bullet was closing fast. 3 inches, 2 inches. I closed my eyes and pulled. No sound except the Moonlight Sonata filled my head as I opened my eyes just in time to see a chunk of Chacho's head explode off his skull, blood and brain matter flinging across the room, covering the ring of hunters around me. Something landed in my hair as well. I decided not to think about what, or who, I needed to wash out. Chacho fell heavily to the ground, the gun still in his hand. The blue light of the power faded, and I could see Tiffany frozen in shock at what had just happened, or possibly what almost happened to her. Our eyes connected, and I could see tears streaking her face. She turned and ran up the stairs and out of sight. The ring of hunters all seemed frozen, waiting for Anand to call out a direction. Anand was equally frozen in indecision, probably because he had a red clump of flesh and hair stuck to his white pinstripe suit. There was a spray pattern of blood across his face. His gaze finally shifted to me, the cool confidence replaced by the red-hot fire of rage. Before he could say anything, a sharp, high-pierced whistle sounded from the train car farther down the line behind me. Leaning out of the open door was Mike, the awkward teenager who knew more than he should.
"You're right, Finn,"
he said without taking his eyes off Anand. My feet were heavy as I shuffled in the direction of the doors. Mike's gaze was locked on Anand. His finger pointed seriously at the bloody figure as if it was loaded. When I was within reach, he grabbed my shoulder and yanked me onto the train. The doors closed and it started moving immediately. I watched as the crowd of hunters and their boss stood staring at me riding away. The last thing I saw was the body lying in the pool of blood, my latest victim. I fell into the closest chair and Mike stood beside me.
I knew you were good, but I had no idea you were that powerful, Mike said with a tinge of enthusiasm and respect. To be honest, I don't know too many people that could have pulled that off.
His comments only faintly registered, my focus lost, a sense of nausea returning. He reached over and carefully pulled something out of my hair.
Huh, you bringing a souvenir with you?
He said, holding up a brown tooth with pink flesh still attached. I turned to the seat next to me and threw up.